Good morning, everybody, and or afternoon or evening. For those, I know that we've got a few in some different time zones as well. My name is Kevin Linsell. I'm going to be facilitating the webinar today. If you just move on to the next slide, please, Chris. I'm just going to quickly run through the agenda whilst we get started. So I'm going to quickly cover, as I say, a little welcome introduction, a few of the housekeeping type areas before handing over in a few minutes over to Andrew Burgess. I'll let each of my attendees do the introduction as they go. They've each got a little bit of a slide and a little background. We've got some brilliant presenters today. We'll then move on after we've done the democratization of AI through to Trevor, who's going to cover some of the business insights through data analytics. A really sort of hot topic at the moment, right, quite sort of here and now, as well as a trend that we expect to see continuing this year. Then we'll be passing over to Jack from Microsoft to talk a bit about in the hybrid office. I suspect everybody's on the call today. I don't imagine too many have had a long commute, and it's probably we've got a very significant audience today. One of the larger audiences. It's probably the most also that are probably sat in their pajamas, which is also a great stat for the trend and the difference that we now have in our working life. Then we'll be handing over to Chris to talk a bit about IoT and some related technologies before we then get to a panel discussion and Q&A to try and wrap up well ahead of 9 AM here UK time. Next slide, please, Chris. Okay, so a little bit of the housekeeping. So the agenda and time we'll just run through. We are going to try and keep to time. I will be nudging my fellow presenters as we go because there's quite a bit of content to cover today. There's an opportunity to ask Q&A in the chat. Everyone is on mute because this is a broadcast webinar. We'll try to cover as many Q&As as we can. We'll also publish those into the LinkedIn activity related to this event as well, and any that we can't get to today as well, we'll also put those in. The webinar, obviously in this style, is being recorded. We can't hear any attendees. You're all on listen only. But we will see the Q&A on there, and we will send out a survey afterwards as well into the LinkedIn event. We'll make the recording available, and there's some other related activities around like blogs and white papers and podcasts and things of that nature as well that we'll be sharing as we go through and over the coming days. And hopefully, you'll all get a lot out of today. Let's keep the dialogue going on LinkedIn afterwards. This is not something that just comes, today in terms of that aspect. Okay, right. With that, we need to move over to our first presenter. So we're going to introduce and let Andrew talk himself through as he goes. I'll just switch his video live so that you can all see and hear Andrew, hopefully. And if Andrew remembers to unmute, I'll then hand over to Andrew. Thank you, Andrew. The floor is yours.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kevin. Let me just share my screen. One second. Let's see this screen. And put it on. Okay, so look good.
Yep, you are live, Andrew. Yep.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. Yes, so a little bit about me first of all. So my name's Andrew Burgess. I'm founder of Greenhouse Intelligence. I'm an AI strategist. And in fact, the photo's a bit out of date. I've got people say I've got a lockdown beard now, so let's put a bit of a beard on there. I'm the author of the Executive Guide to Artificial Intelligence, which was published about 1.5 years ago by Paul Grove Macmillan. I also did quite a bit of other writing and speaking on AI. I spoke at the All-Party Parliamentary Group on AI last year. I'm Senior Visiting Fellow at Loughborough University for AI and RPA, and also expert in residence at Imperial College at the Enterprise Lab for AI. I also write a lot for different journals, etc. But my bread and butter stuff, the core work that I do, is around creating AI strategies for enterprises, and that really means helping them understand and implement artificial intelligence. So what I want to do over 10 minutes is really explain what AI is, help you understand what AI does, and how you might start to implement AI. So I've got two main slides here. The first one is about understanding AI, and it's going to build up over the slide. And the first thing to remember about AI, or the first thing to understand about AI, is there's three meta objectives that it's trying to do. The first piece is around capturing information. Once we've captured that information, we want to understand what is happening. And then once we understand what is happening, we'd ideally like to understand why something's happening. Okay, so those are the kind of the three big areas. And within each of those, there's different capabilities of AI. And I'm going to talk about what AI does, i.e. its capabilities, rather than how it does it and the technical stuff, because I think, you know, for this audience, we want to understand how it's going to help my business rather than kind of the underlying technology. So within capturing information, well, across all of them, to be honest, there's these two separate groups of data. There's unstructured data and structured data. Unstructured data is things like images, sounds, the written word. Structured data is things like spreadsheets, databases, web forms, etc. And AI can try and capture and make sense of those different types of data. So within the unstructured data, we've got image recognition. Some of you may have already heard of image recognition. You know, a classic example is this a picture of a dog or not? But you know, the ability to train the AI to recognize different things in images or different types of images, often used in things like facial recognition technologies, recognizing number plates, reading, you know, seeing who's outside the door, those sorts of things. But very popular part of AI at the moment is image recognition, very quickly developing. The second one under unstructured data is around speech recognition, and this is the ability to understand the words that people are saying, whether that's a recording or live, and to actually extract the words from the voice. Now, what we're not talking about at the moment is understanding the intent and the meaning of what they're saying. That comes under the what is happening bit. All we're doing is capturing the words that are being spoken. And one of the reasons I broke the capabilities down into these different groups is because with an AI application, typically what you do, you build up of a number of different capabilities, and I'll show you how that might work in a second. So speech recognition is really taking that speech, understanding the words that are being spoken. When we come to text, so free-form text, whether that's in books or documents or emails, AI is very good at being able to classify those documents and extract the metadata from them. So if you think about contracts, for example, you might want to understand whether that contract is an employment contract, a commercial contract, or a rental contract, for example. And you want to be able to extract the information from that as well. So who are the parties, what's the value of the contract, what are the limits of liability, etc. But also on other documents, emails, you know, what is this person complaining about? Within invoices, what's this invoice for? How much is the VAT? All those sorts of things where we've got unstructured, or in case of invoices, they're semi-structured documents. Semi-structured, I say, because the data can change. You know, it's more or less the same every time, but it can change. So it's got that variability, which AI is very good at coping with. So those are all unstructured data. When we come to structured data, again, this is things like spreadsheets, databases, etc. AI can start to correlate and look for correlations and patterns within the data and start to group them up. So build these clusters of data. And this is very good when we come to some of these next stages around prediction, etc. So the great thing about clustering is you don't necessarily need to know the question to ask, because the AI will find those correlations for you, which is kind of a different approach, a kind of an unsupervised approach to AI here. So that's everything under capturing information. Then we move into what is happening. And the first piece here is around natural language understanding, NLU, or people call it natural language processing. And this is where we start to look at the intent or the meaning of what people are saying. So, for example, if we'd somebody had rung up to and spoken to an AI, they might have said, I want to change my address or something. So the speech recognition would have understood the words they're saying. But in terms of what they want to do, that's when the natural language understanding works out the intent of that. So in the example here, I've got, it's a chatbot for ordering flowers. So if you want to order the flowers, it's about understanding the verb, which is order, and the noun, which is the flowers. So so that's understanding the meaning, the intent, as they're often used in chatbots. Then we come to reasoning and problem solving, sometimes called optimization. And this is where AI is very good at solving specific problems where you have a goal to achieve. So a classic example is around sat nav, so understanding the route you want to get to, and rather than just doing it of the brute force of looking at all the possible routes, AI can come to the optimal route very, very efficiently. But we can also use that in things like identifying protein molecules that are going to do a specific role for medical purposes, or let me think. It's sorry, I can't. There's plenty of other examples where we're looking at kind of the optimization piece within that. Sorry, yes, in terms of games as well. So you might have heard of where DeepMind beat the best player in the world at Go. So that's an optimization problem where you're rewarding the system based on achieving the win in the game or scoring the highest number of points, etc. And then the final one in this section is what is happening. So this is around prediction, what's going to happen next. And a lot of this, as I said before, is where you're using that big data. So we've identified correlations and you can start to predict what's going to happen next. And obviously this is very useful in terms of predicting sales, predicting customer churn, predicting customers who might go into debt, any of those things. As long as you've got the right amount of data in the background, then AI is very good at doing that. All of those are all narrow artificial intelligence, so it's very good at doing one thing very well. When we start to look at why something's happening, this is where we get out of the realm of stuff that you can buy now or build now and into the world of labs and really science fiction, because AI can't yet understand and have cognition. All it is a number of these different technologies that I've described here built on top of each other to kind of imitate cognition. So if any of your if you're speaking to AI vendors and they say that their software has understanding and cognition, then they're going to be lying, because it's just a mixture of all these different types of technologies. So if you think, right, that looks interesting, I'd like to have some of that, then how do you actually implement it? So next slide really shows the different approaches to how you might want to start your AI journey and implement it. The simplest approach is a vendor approach. So as long as your particular need for AI exactly matches what the vendor can provide, then a vendor approach is very good, because the vendor has done all the hard work in developing the algorithm, probably training a lot of it as well, and you're just implementing it and perhaps training it on your own data as well. So for a lot of organizations, a vendor approach is very, very good, but you might have to compromise if the vendor doesn't do exactly what you want. But there's some good examples of different vendors here. There's a chatbot vendor, there's a vendor, Hyperscience, which extract data from text and handwriting as well. At the other end of the scale, we've got this bespoke approach. So if you've got a unique data set and you've got an opportunity to do something that nobody else has done, then you probably want to do some bespoke coding in Python. You might use TensorFlow, Jupyter Notebooks, etc. Bring in data scientists, and that's going to be kind of a long and maybe expensive journey, but the rewards are going to be huge. But kind of in the middle of each of those, there's what I call the configure approach. And what we're doing here is we're taking pre-built algorithms. If you look at Microsoft, they've got on the Azure platform, on Amazon, on AWS, they've got algorithms that you can access through APIs. So all you need to do is build those into your existing software application, or build a software application around them to access AI capabilities. And the other way as well is through these three data science platforms as well. So there's H2O and Able. reasonable platforms. Able is very good, I think, particularly for SMEs, because it's very, very simple to use, particularly from a business point of view. But it takes away a lot of that, the work that a data scientist would do, and puts it in the hands of the business, and which is really where this democratization of AI idea comes from. And then finally, you know, if you once your journey is more mature, then you might want to think about this as a managed service. So you might want a deployment platform. You might want to bring in more data scientists on demand. You might need to start labeling your data, and you might need to use companies like mine to help you manage all this and find the right vendors to build the platform, etc. So that's kind of a journey you might take as you're building your AI. So the last slide I wanted to do very quickly is the message to leave you with, which is don't believe the hype, in the words of Public Enemy. A lot of what is spoken about AI at the moment is froth and hype, and there's lots of big claims around. Hopefully, by taking this very pragmatic approach and breaking down AI into its core capabilities and how you can implement it from a very practical point of view, you can see through the hype and build AI that's going to be useful, particularly for your business and what you need. And I think that's really the message to kind of drive home here. Don't believe the hype. So thank you very much. It's a very quick 10 minutes, but hopefully that's given you a very good idea, and we'll obviously be able to take questions later on. And now I'll pass over to Trevor.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andrew. That was really useful. Just whilst Trevor gears up his slides and shares those, it's we should have had the soundtrack there from Public Enemy. Would have been an ideal excuse on there. But also the chatbots, very important. Remember, we've got the flowers. Not long now till Valentine's Day. I'll pass over now to Trevor. Thank you.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you, and thank you to Andrew as well. Very insightful start to the day. Of course, AI is very much built on data. I think you'll agree with that, Andrew. And over the next 10 minutes or so, I'll take you on a whirlwind of my experience in this world. My name's Trevor Hunt. I work for Behind Every Cloud. I'm a 30+ year financial services technologist. Worked in a number of big organisations, so I know where some of the problems lie. I will whirlwind through a lot of information here. A very lofty title of Business Insights through Data Analytics. Let's jump straight in with what the panacea of data analytics looks like. It kind of looks like this. I'm sure you've seen the wonderful slides. Somebody standing there, they've got something on one of these wonderful Surface screens. They're able to plug and play, drag and drop, what if analysis in these wonderful histograms and bar charts and geo maps. It's an amazing place to be, and also your management has got this on their Surface devices as well, or iPads. That's the panacea of what we're all trying to get to, but the reality for many businesses looks a little bit like this. You've got Stephanie and Tim in accounts who can produce it on a spreadsheet, and that's about as good as it really gets. Now the question is why? Why is that the case, that we haven't really progressed too far in the world of business insights, data analytics? I think there's a lot of legacy that we've got to cut through. Interestingly, Gartner always have a good view on things. Last year, they put out this in the middle of the year, their top 10 trends of data and analytics, saying that the pandemic has left most organisations fragile and in an uncertain state. We all rushed to work remotely, those people that had to do that. But as they rightly say, with every crisis, there's also an opportunity. And I think management now working remotely realise the strategic and mission critical importance of data and analytics to run their businesses. They can't as easily have those casual conversations they were having previously. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about evolution to reality, covering quickly workplace technology, although Jack's going to dive into that, a little bit about the business technology, and then some 3 V's of how to improve your data analytics. So let's talk about evolution of the workplace first of all. I started my career back in the late 80s, early 90s, and in those days I was head of a department called data processing. Funny how things sort of come around, isn't it? But data processing in those days was Lotus 123, IBM PCs, and a centralized department churning all their data into it. And clearly things have moved on since then in terms of workplace technology. Through the 2010s, we started to see a lot of remote technology become available, things like Blackberries, iPhones, and laptops that you can actually carry in a briefcase as opposed to on a trolley. 2020, apparently we digitally transformed by suddenly working remotely and everything that comes with that. I think the reality is that in some cases, Tim and Stephanie are still using their spreadsheets at home through some kind of remote access point. That's clearly not what data analytics in 2020 should really look like. Why has that come about? I think it's because of the evolution of business technology. I'm sure many of you have seen this kind of thing before, but this is my own kind of depiction of it. Let's break things down over the last 20, 30 years in terms of infrastructure, architecture, data management and application development. 30 years ago, we would have had an on-premise data center or equipment room. The architecture would have been very monolithic, big, ugly applications. You might have had a few databases, like something like a DBase or a FoxPro or Infomix or something like that. And application development was very much done in a waterfall kind of methodology. Fast forward to the 2000s, and Agile first started to appear, where people realized they needed to get technology delivered much more quickly in a matter of weeks and months rather than years. We also started to consolidate databases into warehouses because we needed that consolidated view. We also started to use multi-tier technology, things like client server, and also private cloud came to a fore. So the ability to virtualize your servers and also make use of colos. Let's bring it right up to date. We're now in the world where many organizations are running DevOps, meaning that they can potentially deliver software daily or even more frequently than that. With the advent of public cloud, we've seen the availability of data lake technology, bringing together that unstructured and structured data into a single place. And also the usage of microservices and APIs as an architecture to reuse certain components and easily interface different applications together. So that's how things have evolved. But the reality for many businesses looks a bit like this. I've got a HR system that works this way, an ERP system that works this way, and a finance system that works this way, all very different and inconsistent. The reason I think behind this is we've taken an application-centric approach to things. We deployed CRMs, we deployed ERPs, HR and accounting systems, a help desk system, and then we needed to start connecting them together. So we started using spreadsheets, or have been using spreadsheets for a long time, and then trying to, maybe there's an access database hidden there. So all these links start to appear that make up what is not a particularly robust structure. Then SaaS comes along, new applications that aren't covered by what the technology department or your software providers deliver to you, and they're running on public cloud. How does all this come together? That's what the typical architecture looks like, and it is multiple platforms stitched together. It's brittle, it's fragile, high maintenance, prone to failure. You've got key person dependencies, people who know how those things work. Data is very siloed. There's limited information about data lineage and mastering, and it's typically batch-based as well, so difficult to get real-time information. So what can I do about this? This is the best metaphor I've seen recently of what a typical architecture looks like these days. Layers and layers and layers of new technology that's been added, and it's also in flight. So it's really difficult to change. Okay, so on a more positive note, let's talk about what 3 things you can kind of do to take you on that data analytics journey. First of all, governance, virtualization and visualization. Data governance, everyone knows this, garbage in, garbage out. Again, back to the AI discussion. There's no point in putting rubbish data into an AI platform because you'll get rubbish out. So it's important to have good data governance. That's going to ensure that you've got coordination across the people, processes and technology, and that will then ensure you've got good availability of your data. It's applicable to the things that you're using it for, the integrity of that data, and also security, including data protection in the world of GDPR. Now, there's a variety of third-party tools out there that can help. If you're a Microsoft Azure or Microsoft shop, you might want to look at this, which is Microsoft's latest data governance tool that's just come out of preview. It's called Purview. Recommend you take a look at that. But as I said, other tools are available. Data virtualization is a relatively new technology. It allows the retrieval and manipulation of data without needing to understand the details of all those interfaces, the format, the source, and provides all that data into one single view. You sometimes hear the view of customer 360 or employee 360. That's done using data virtualization tools. Again, there's a variety of third-party tools out there. In BEC, we work quite closely with a company called Fraxis, called Intender, who have a tool called Fraxis. But interestingly, Microsoft have also stepped into this space with the Synapse Analytics package that was announced last year. Again, came out of preview and allows you to do something similar if you're running an Azure stack. And finally, data visualization. So again, somewhat similar to virtualization, but with visualization, you're doing data modeling. You're ingesting, transforming, integrating, enriching your data, and then you can start doing the really cool stuff like reporting and onto things like Gartner talks about, which is storyboards of data, things that are interactive rather than just a static dashboard, augmented with AI. And once again, Microsoft somewhat leading the way at the moment compared to its peers of Tableau and Click, both very strong tools, but Power BI being built into that Microsoft stack is a great product as well and easily available. That's all I'm going to cover today. Thank you very much for listening. If you're interested in hearing more, please contact us. Details here below.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Carl. That's really useful. What I'm going to do now is get Jack's content up and live. We'll get in there now and just switch your video across. And we shall go over. What I never knew was that we could spell governance with a V, which is the one thing that was quite strange on that. So I'm going to have to be careful on the children's homeschooling when that starts a little bit later today, that we don't start with spelling today, or else I'm going to be putting V's in everything. Okay, Jack, thank you very much. Over to yourself to go through the next exciting topic around our trends.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kevin, and cheers, Trevor. So hi, everybody. I'm Jack Lewis, and I was asked to talk today a little bit about hybrid office. So let's just do a level set and just acknowledge what hybrid office is. Essentially what we mean here is working from home, and as Kevin said, probably in your pajamas, and in the office whilst being productive, and the experiences of working both at home and in the office being fantastic regardless of where you are. Now, we all know that organisations have adopted some sort of modern collaboration and productivity solution, such as Microsoft Teams, over the last 12 months. And of course, COVID has resulted in rapid adoption of these types of technologies. But we do have, as I start to speak to SMEs and partners around the world, some organisations that end up with suboptimal configurations, which can then result in these collaboration technologies being perceived as quote unquote no good. So I thought we'd take 10 minutes today to try and prevent that, provide some recommendations for how you can improve your setups to allow you to now take advantage of the technologies that you have access to. And of course, if we were doing this talk a year ago, the format would have been completely different, right? We'd have introduced a hybrid office and then somehow had a shoehorned in the Teams and Microsoft 365 dream. But a lot of organizations are already using these types of technologies today. So let's start with the networking side of things. Now, this could become a problem when people start to return to the office, and we did see this after the first initial lockdown, when certain parts of the organisation did return while others were working at home due to social distancing rules. And what you're potentially going to end up here with is a worse experience when people are in the office versus when they're at home. And this is essentially due to just suboptimal networking configurations and setups that you may have within your within your own infrastructure, so when people work from the office. So the solution to this is, of course, to optimize those networking configurations, but also make sure that you're not running into unsupported scenarios, which can happen. Now, there is a bit of a common misconception on how client devices connect to Microsoft 365 Teams services over the internet. There's this common misconception that when you're in the office, you connect over the corporate network, and if you're in a branch office, that might mean going back to a data center or the head office and then breaking out over the internet, and then you go over the internet and connect directly into some sort of Teams service here. This is, of course, not what's actually happening. In reality, what actually happens is you will spend a certain amount of time on the corporate network, which we're trying to reduce as much as possible. Then you'll end up on the internet. But Microsoft at this point have actually established some ISP peering relationships, which means your time spent on the internet, if you're trying to connect into a Microsoft 365 service based on the IP address, is going to be actually very short, because we want to get you into that Microsoft global network as quickly as possible, because there's no jitter, no packet loss, the latency is very low. It's essentially optimized for media. Now, one of the things to call out here is that if you adopted Microsoft 365 before all of the COVID thing happened and you weren't using Teams, you'd probably get away with this. The issue with introducing Teams or some other modern collaboration technology and having a suboptimal networking configuration is that you're dealing with real-time media. So the recommendation here is, when people return to the office, make sure that their time spent on the corporate network is as short as possible. So what are we talking about here from a practical sense? Well, if we move on to the next slide, what we actually mean here is reducing the amount of time you spend on those corporate networks and using technologies like software-defined wide area networking technology and local internet breakouts, so that when you're working in the branch office here, you don't have to traverse over to the head office through your ISP into the Microsoft network. You're simply breaking out locally to your local ISP and then connecting into the Microsoft network. The other thing to call out here as well is we know that a lot of SMEs are using VPNs when the people work from home. It's important that you configure split tunnel VPN here. The reason for this is you can configure which traffic is and isn't sent down the virtual private network. And what you want to do is exclude the traffic that's being sent down that virtual private network if the destination is some sort of Microsoft 365 service. This will inevitably improve the experiences that your employees receive, and it's one of the key things to call out. Now, there's obviously a lot to this. It's quite a technical task. What I'd point you at is this aka.ms link down here. So aka.ms/PNC. That stands for Principles of Networking Connectivity, where you'll find a whole bunch of details around what you should and what you shouldn't be doing, supported versus unsupported configurations. And I do acknowledge that this does start a bit of a topic of conversation with security people that may work within your organization, who are used to maybe investing in perimeter-based security models, networking appliances. There are potentially better ways of protecting access into Microsoft 365 and the data that resides within them, and you can end up with a better employee experience there. So that's the first thing to call out. The next thing to call out, and we did actually see this becoming a bit of a problem after the first lockdown when people returned to the office, is making sure that you're investing in Teams certified devices. The issue that we saw was that when users returned to the office and you had multiple people in the same room, if they were using the laptop's built-in microphone and speakers, when more than one person joined a Teams meeting, that experience was horrible for everybody in the room. So the way to solve that problem is make sure you're buying certified headsets. And also, if you've got some shared spaces, such as a meeting room, then maybe look at investing in some sort of Teams room system to get the most out of that space. That will then allow them to join Teams meetings within that conference space. And of course, the microphone equipment, etc., that's included within those Teams room systems is optimized for those types of scenarios. Now, the other thing to call out super quick is that on-premise is perimeter-based security models and products can't protect access into and the information that resides within Microsoft 365. So what do you need to do there? You need to adopt an identity-driven security model. And the best way of doing this within Microsoft 365 is to use a technology called conditional access. Now, this is a highly adopted technology within Microsoft 365. The way that it works is you write some rules that state if Jack is outside of the office and he's on a Windows device, in order to access Teams, he must do a multi-factor authentication and he must be on an Intune enrolled device that has encryption turned on, has no signs of malware, etc., etc. There are also some clever AI technologies built into this where we will actually profile users and we will assign a session risk. One of the great things that this is able to do from a million miles high is if I usually log in from Manchester and then 20 minutes later I log in from Australia, it's physically impossible to make that travel, right? So then my session risk will raise and it might actually block access to my account and notify somebody and require me to do a password reset. Now, a lot of this stuff is built on top of something we call the Microsoft Graph. Now, given the short space of time today, we don't have time to cover this in depth, but essentially think of this as 3 separate knowledge graphs that represent you as an individual, your organization, and the world. The world graph is used to better protect you against attacks and improve our products. But one of the great things about the individual graph and the organizational graph is you almost end up with this self-fulfilling prophecy of productivity where the more you use the Microsoft 365 product set, the better profiling of your usage we're able to do, which means we're able to better provide insights across your organization, which means that your users will be more productive, which results in better insights. And there's no better example of this than Project Cortex, which I'd highly encourage everybody on this call to go and check out. This is now starting to release some products out of it. But one of the things that it's able to do, building on some of the stuff that Andrew spoke about, is essentially take unstructured data that sits in Microsoft 365, apply some structured data tags to it, which, in essence, doesn't sound all that exciting. But as a result of doing that, what we're able to do is then within SharePoint automatically create knowledge centers. So imagine you're onboarding into a new organization, there's a project you've been assigned to, those SharePoint knowledge sites will automatically be created and it'll know who are the experts and all the content that's relevant to that. So definitely go and check this stuff out because this is where we're going now. So the 3 recommendations are essentially networking improvements, make sure you're using team certified devices, make sure you're investing in an identity driven security model. And of course, the more of Microsoft 365 you use, the more value you'll get from your technology investments and the better the products and the insights will be. So with that, I'd like to finish by just saying thank you. And I will now be handing over to Chris to talk about IoT. Thanks, everybody.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jack. That's really good. Chris, if you want to key up your slides and on there, I think what I did like was the self-fulfilling prophecy of productivity. Sounds like I could do with some of that on some of these busy days when we're on Teams back to back, which will be really, really useful. And it is interesting to see. Obviously, now we're already getting, hopefully in the coming weeks and months, more people back into the office. That you already start to hear those people saying, "Yeah, I'm going to have to work from home today because I'm going to spend all day on lots of video calls because." We never used to use video as much prior to this pandemic, and now of course having everybody else milling around in the office or maybe a clear view of the person behind you screen and things like that all changes the effect that we need for these sorts of things. So let's just make sure Chris's content is all live, and then we can hand over to Chris to go through some of the IoT. Okay, over to you, Chris.
Excellent, thanks, Kev. And yeah, thanks to all the speakers this morning. It's been packed full of some really useful info. My name is Chris Pont. I am CEO here at EG, and we are a software delivery, data and BI consultancy. We've got clients across various sectors and geographies, from local SMEs, councils, building societies, right the way through to global brands. And when we talk about software delivery, not just software development, as we work with our clients on the whole end to end. So we help with the discovery using our inception workshops. We produce business and investment cases. We develop and test the software. We automate infrastructure deployment, and we support and maintain various platforms. And that goes for data and business intelligence solutions too. So today I'm going to talk to you about IoT, the Internet of Things, and it's a bit difficult to know where to pitch this with such a varied audience. So a brief description that I found highlighted at the top of Google when you search for IoT. It says the Internet of Things, or IoT, is a system of interrelated computing devices, mechanical and digital machines, objects, animals, or people that are provided with unique identifiers and the ability to transfer data over a network without requiring human to human or human to computer interaction. I think that's a pretty rubbish IoT description, really. It's not exactly exciting. And I think a better description would be the Internet of Things relates to a world where everyday devices leverage the power of internet connectivity. And that could be devices that collect and send data. For example, a smart doorbell that collects data about when the button's been pushed and uploads a video of whoever's standing at the front door. I mean, I've got a smart cat flap at home. My wife worries about when she hasn't seen one of the cats for a day or two, and the cat flap will actually scan the tracking chip in his neck and send a push notification whenever he appears back home. So that's really useful. And then there's devices that receive commands and action them. So I can lock that cat flap when I know the cat's actually home, or I've got a smart lawnmower that I can either send out when I want to mow the lawn, or I can tell it to go back to its dock if my son's out playing with his toys in the backyard. Or more likely is that we have devices that do a bit of both. They collect data and they receive commands. So what does this technology matter? What benefits does this bring us, particularly in industry? Well, this technology unlocks a lot of value across pretty much every sector. For example, just move on to the next animation. So better insight. Being able to monitor and collect data to understand behaviors, actions and trends means that we can develop better products, we can deploy resources more effectively, we can market more effectively. I've got an HP printer at home and it knows how much I print, and HP will ship me ink whenever it's close to running out, so I don't need to think about it. I mean, if I print the complete works of Shakespeare, then they probably will step me up the pricing tiers pretty quickly, but it's monitoring how much use I'm giving it. It's sending me supplies when appropriate. We've got more maintained equipment, so monitoring the health of industrial equipment. And this is where machine learning would have a role to play, because if we know that once a piece of equipment starts exhibiting certain behaviors, then generally it's only got about 60 more movements or 500 miles or 30 more lifts in it before it's out of commission, then we can send a maintenance crew out to fix it during expected downtime, and rather than having the machine out during production hours. So that could be worth a fortune in certain industries. My car, for example, will already report to the manufacturer when it needs a service, and if it breaks down, it will self-diagnose. It will send that data off so that potentially the breakdown person turns up with the right parts, and it's much more efficient than sending out the wrong person who doesn't have the ability to fix the problem. We've got more effective use of resource, so precision crane movements. One of my colleagues worked out in West Africa at one of the shipping ports for a while, and they stated that if they could just get one additional crane movement out per hour, that would be worth over $1 million per year. You know, having huge container ships berthed for any longer than necessary is a really expensive business. Safer environments. Footfall monitoring is something that we're involved in right now. So using one of the Raspberry Pi devices, which I'll go into in a sec, we're able to work out how many Wi-Fi devices are in a given area. I mean, it's an approximation, as some people will have more than one device, or some won't have any at all, but it allows our client to then deploy safety personnel to the correct areas, as well as work out the routes that people are taking across their properties and improve that experience. And security and asset monitoring. So coming back to shipping and shipping containers, obviously it's useful to track where a container is, and depending on the cargo, there may be environmental concerns. So it may arrive at 2 degrees, you can check it when it arrives, but did it go above 5 degrees at any point during its journey? Were there any shocks or vibrations? Were the container doors opened at any point? What were the noise levels during transit? You know, we can monitor all of that sort of stuff using pretty inexpensive devices now, and then leverage those benefits. So why are we getting particularly excited for IoT now? I mean, a lot of what I've just spoken about has been possible for a while. Well, there's a few things now that affect the ability for smaller businesses to make use of or prototype using this technology. So firstly, the adoption of inexpensive devices. And this on screen here is a Raspberry Pi Zero. I've actually got one in my hand here. This device is about £15. It can run a full version of Linux. It's got an HDMI port. It's got SD card slot on it. It's got USB ports and the ability to extend it using what's called hats. So a GPS or 4G hat is about £60, and that then gives this device the ability to not only know where it is, but send that data back using a 4G network. And for about £20, you can get a box of about 40 sensors you can plug into it, including shock sensors, light sensors, temperature sensors, humidity sensors, infrared sensors, all sorts. And the key thing here is that you can deploy code using .NET, C#, Python, Java, basically anything that will run on Linux. So we're not limited to embedded code development now, which is a little more niche. It's now entirely possible that the developer who's been hired to deliver a new payment integration for your website would be able to write something to run on one of these devices. We've got the arrival of 5G. Now we've been through upgrades of various different mobile networks before, from 2G to 3G to 4G, and you would have been forgiven for thinking that 5G just means a bit faster. And yes, higher bandwidth is the top of that list. But that part, the part that enables the Internet of Things, is more than that. So we've got things like lower latency. Every time your mobile device starts communicating, there is a small delay, and it may only be a few milliseconds, but that could matter with a smart device, particularly with things like self-driving cars. You know, that latency needs to be kept as low as possible. The radio technology that 5G makes use of promises much lower latency, meaning that these devices have the ability to rely on a quick response. Greater reliability. Again, the radio technology has improved the reliability, meaning that once you have a connection, it's more stable than it would have been with 4G or 3G. Edge compute. This is the really exciting one for me. So we will have the ability, using containerization technology, such as Kubernetes, to deploy software at the mobile base station. So for areas that are dense in a particular IoT device, you know, and I'm thinking of things like self-driving cars here, rather than having to connect back to a data center or back to a public cloud, the processing capability is right next to that first hop. So this further improves the latency, and it can mean that devices seem much more intelligent, even though that intelligence is built into the mobile network rather than the device itself. And finally, we've got lower battery consumption. So there are a few different flavors of 5G, but effectively the radio technology means that we can have small, low-powered devices running on batteries for potentially years. They can be deployed stuck on walls, and you know, because of that low power usage, they can run on batteries rather than needing to plug into mains power. And lastly, public cloud now offers a huge array of platform services to support IoT as commodity services that you're able to dial up and down as needed. So SMEs can proof of concept IoT ideas with minimal outlay and minimal risk. Services to provision and manage these devices are centrally available, and storage is pretty cheap now, meaning that we can collect a huge amount of data and process it effectively to draw insight and make those automated decisions. Thank you very much, and now back to Kev.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. We're going to great topics covered there. You know, we've literally, it's a bit of a whirlwind tour on there. We're going to open up now to a panel discussion. So Chris, if you could just advance the slide to the question. We're doing this a little bit different to how I'd normally run a panel discussion, because obviously normally we'd all be sat in a room and I could pass the microphone and field questions from the audience. So a little bit different in these times. So we're only going to put one question to the panel, and I'm going to go around. You're going to be fortunate enough in the order of which I see people at the bottom of my Teams screen and that on there. But then we're going to open up to Q&A. So just a nudge to everyone that's online and everyone that's in the live session. You've got a Q&A button up in the top right of your screen, depending on how your screen's laid out, of course. Top right, where you can ask questions, and that's across any of our panel. Obviously, no guarantee that we'll have, you know, the brilliant answer, but the main thing is to get a bit of discussion around that Q&A, and then we can follow that up as well afterwards within the LinkedIn media as well. So first, I'm looking at my screen in terms of my order, is if each one would like to unmute and to address how will these technologies affect livelihoods in 2021, so this year and beyond. You don't have to necessarily stick with what you've presented in terms of the topics. You can address any of the others and call out things that maybe the other panel attendees will also touch on when it gets to them. And first in my list is Trevor. So I'm afraid you're up first.
Thanks, Kevin. Good job. I'm prepared for this, isn't it? So I'd like to answer this question in a way of, again, history and context. I was living in Japan back in 2002 when SARS hit, and was amazed at the way that it was contained and technology was used then to limit the spread, limit travel. Also, when travel happened, there were these heat sensing devices that were up almost immediately. I've been amazed in the last year how there's this massive contrast between the Western world and Asia. It's very clear that the Western world has not deployed this technology that it's got, that has now moved on 20 years, to protect people and their well-being in a world of COVID. I read about this Chinese company called SenseTime. They use AI to do non-contact scans of people's temperature in public places. Up to 10 a second are being done. So I would love to think that there'd be more collaboration going on between West and East in terms of making technology be used for things that will help going forward in protecting our actual physical livelihoods and safety.
Great, thanks, Trevor. So now next on my list is over to Chris for his take on the same question, please. You need to just come off mute, Chris.
Thanks, Kev. I think with the technologies that were spoken about, generally it means that staff are able to work more effectively, both in terms of geography, you know, where they're able to work, and in terms of when they're able to work, and also with the information that's available to them. You know, the advent of AI, machine learning, etc. That means that people have that key information to be able to make more informed decisions. And I think with a lot of these technologies, whenever there's a new type of technology arrive, often there's a worry there that people are put out of a job. But I think you know, staff still have key knowledge in the areas that they work in, to fall back on. The machine learning, the AI can only do what it's been asked of it. And so the work that we've already been doing with clients, I think what we've seen is that it's more likely that people are upskilled and redeployed to be more effective, doing less manual tasks, and using their skills more effectively.
Great, thanks, Chris. That's really useful. What we're going to do now is move over to next in the list is Jack. So I'll just send your video live, Jack. If you'd like to, have a take. Same question, please.
Yeah, sure thing. I think the reality is that businesses are going to continue to rely on those collaboration technologies that we've spoken about throughout the various presentations to allow them to continue to operate. I'd say what is interesting though, so my day job is essentially working with partners to get them to build apps and experiences that exist within teams. Some of the use cases that we've seen that are either going to be landing shortly or have been available, have been released recently, are incredible, particularly in the educational and health space. And just building on some of the stuff that Trevor mentioned there, some of the experiences that are going to be brought into people's just collaboration workspaces, so the place where they operate day to day, really could help businesses do things faster, better, cheaper, better insights. So I think it's exciting times, but I think the reality is that businesses are going to continue to rely on these collaboration technologies for a while until we can get more people back into the offices, right?
Yeah, I think that we're going to be in this new whatever, and I keep saying the word, I seem to be using it forever now, a new normal and whatever that. I think it's still evolving. I don't think we actually know what normal is anymore. We're lucky if we know what day of the week it is. Okay, right, and last but by no means least, Andrew.
Brilliant, thanks Kevin. Yeah, so I think looking specifically at AI, I think it's going to impact both individuals and businesses, at both those levels. From an individual point of view, AI is everywhere. Phones, voice assistants, sat nav, social media, even checking the weather, all accesses AI at some point in that journey. But there's also a darker side to that as well. Big tech firms' use of data, Google, Facebook, etc. People need to be aware about how their data is being used, and also facial recognition technology being used in public places as well is just a couple of examples of how AI and data can be abused, I think, and people need to be aware about how that happens. They need to be educated and informed. From a business point of view, there are huge opportunities for AI, but I think what businesses need to do, and this reflects what Chris was just saying, is focus on where AI can augment their capabilities rather than replace people. AI has the ability to deliver insights that no other technology can, and that's the bit that we need to focus on. But in the words of Spider-Man's Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility, and AI has the capability to build in bias and unfairness and to do this at scale. So it's really, if you are implementing AI, it's your responsibility to make sure that you mitigate those as much as possible, and really think about, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Think very carefully about where you're going to be using AI. So kind of summarize, I think, for both at that individual and corporate level, understanding the capabilities and the risks of AI has pretty much become a life skill, something we all need to understand, and really, right now you can't afford to ignore it.
Brilliant, thank you. Who doesn't like a Spider-Man reference as well? Exactly. At this time in the morning? That's brilliant. Okay. Chris, if you could just advance on to the next slide, we're going to move on to the Q&A now. We've got roughly about 5 minutes left at the time on there, and we've got a few that have come in already. So I'm going to do them sort of roughly in the order of which they've come in, and obviously, whilst they're maybe specific to your own areas, be it IoT or AI, etc., feel free for anybody else that wants to chip in as well. So I'm not going to specifically aim at any individual, because there's a lot of commonality across the team today, as well as your own specialist areas. Just looking ahead a little bit, whilst anybody puts any further questions in that they wish to ask, is we will look for some survey feedback from it. We're always looking to run these, and it's been a whistle stop tour today to fit it into the time available, and to thank my presenters for being able to pretty much stick to time as well. But if there's interest in a longer, more in-depth session on any or all of these topics as well, then let us know in that feedback, or drop us an email or over LinkedIn, and we can look around setting that up. The recording also will be made available shortly if you've missed some and it's whistle stop, or want to share it obviously amongst your colleagues and your wider network. Also, we've got, as mentioned, the blogs and white papers and things on the website. Have a look at those, and also, if you go through the replay, each of our presenters today have got their own, website, their own, this is not this is an EG facilitated event. We've got, great organisations that we partner and work with, and that as well. Go and take a look at, what they do and what they can offer you. So, questions. First one we're going to go through is, this one's a good one. This is, what one piece of advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are aiming to venture into IoT and mobile apps development? And whoever would like to take it, please just come off mute and dive in.
I'll take that then. I think, as I sort of touched on in my part of the presentation, there's quite a low barrier to entry with some of this stuff now. What was traditionally quite expensive is now really easy to get into. The tooling is cheap or often free. As I said, these devices here, £15, so really cheap to get hold of one of those, and the tool set is generally free depending on what you're using. Microsoft in particular make a lot of these tools free to allow you to develop on the .NET platform, and so my advice would be to just jump in, give it a go. There's lots of resources available online. Udemy in particular, there's lots of tutorial videos taking you through the basics and how you get started. Give it a go, see how you get on, and see what's available to you.
Brilliant, thank you, Chris. We'll move down the list onto the next question rather than going around further. The next one we've got is, thank you for your time and insightful information. What would you advise to software vendors, resellers, startup? So I'm guessing I'll paraphrase that one is, so if you're a reseller in a software vendor in a startup space, now any advice from across the team? Quite a broad one.
Yeah, it's quite a broad question, really. It depends on what you're specializing in, I guess. I think for me, some of the AI and machine learning stuff is really interesting, and it's good just to get a high level view on how this technology works and what sort of benefits it can bring. Start exploring that with your customers and see what sticks really. If you've got particular customers in a particular sector where they can make use of that technology, then you'll find out pretty quickly, and you can then sort of start taking a deeper dive into that particular area.
Okay, great.
I think
Kevin, sorry,
it's Andrew. Just very quickly, I think it's focusing on what's going to add value to the client. I think a lot of people, the answer to the client's problem is the solution you're selling, and that's obviously leads to a lot of pain for people. Just let's focus on the where the value is, and if there isn't value, then let's not do it. I think that's my advice.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andrew. I think Trevor, were you about to dive in?
Yes. It's not one bit of advice, but again, 3 little snippets. So with technology the way it is today, always think cloud first, right? That technology, as Chris said, is easily available out on the cloud. Secondly, data first. So we've got 2 firsts, right? But as you build out your organization, think very carefully about where your data is, how you're structuring your data, how you're governing your data. And thirdly, I'd say be very purpose-led. Yes, you can be customer-centric, but also think about the purpose that you're really creating that organization, what problem you're really trying to fix, and stay true to it.
Great, thanks, Joe. I'm going to go in the interest of time. We're a minute past the hour, so we will pick up those questions that we haven't got to. We will cover and post those into the LinkedIn channel. I've got one which I'm going to say is definitely probably going to be Andrew. I'm going to go to on this one, which is have you any insights on how AI is being applied to clients' existing data to cross-reference and improve the quality, plug the gaps, fix data typing errors, etc.?
There's a lot of stuff in there. Cross-reference and improve the quality.
If it's a long answer, then we'll take it. We'll post it to the LinkedIn channel, because I'm conscious, 2 minutes past the hour, and people have got homeschooling and work and other things to be in.
I think the short answer is yes. There's some NLP, natural language processing technologies within those things that can do that as well. So yes, I think the short answer is yes. We can do that, but I can provide more detail, as you say, in the chat.
Brilliant. All right, thank you all. Well, we are going to close now. It's just past the hour. Thank you very much to all of my presenters today, and also thank you for everyone for attending, listening, asking lots of good questions. We will get the answers to all of those and share them. Please let us have the feedback. We'll make the replay available in that as well, and wish you all a good day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.